It is S&L Landry Locker out in Las Vegas. Cody Stoots with you today, talking about the Houston Texans and this offseason. CJ Stroud got some new work on his plate, getting ready for the 2026 season. Easy for me to say. CJ Stroud not going anywhere, despite how bothered John McClain is getting about this. Couple of cuts that are a little interesting around the NFL, and we'll see more of those names pop up. And when you look at the numbers, Texans got some pretty clear needs. We'll talk about all that and so much more here on the show today. Appreciate you for joining in live. Get live in the comments section. We'll address some of your comments, questions, joys, and concerns over the course of the channel as well, of course, the show today as well. So I'm getting ready for the show, and Landry texts me, and he says, "Hey, I just landed in Vegas, and I'm looking at McClain's tweets, and I'm looking at this stuff." He's like, "Did I miss something?" McClain's all up in arms that CJ Stroud's going to get traded. Like, what's going on here? And I was like, okay, well, let me go take a look here. And I'm looking, and sure enough, here's the McClainer. He said, "These stories about CJ Stroud possibly being traded just blow me away. He ain't getting traded. Davis Mills ain't getting promoted to replace him. Let's keep track of these tweets and post them right before camp begins for accountability purposes." And I'm like, I haven't seen this over the course of the day. I haven't seen what McClain's talking about. And I go do some searching and some looking on Twitter, and I see a couple of people taking a very small thing from Todd McShay and saying, "Oh, well, goodness, what about the Texans trading CJ Stroud?" So then, go do my due diligence, go listen to Todd McShay. And McShay had a nothing burger about CJ Stroud. Okay. He had a nothing burger. It was a very, very strange characterization of what he thought was the CJ Stroud situation. He said that the Houston Texans quarterback would be one of the quarterbacks that teams would call on to try to improve their quarterback situation. And he said, you watch a team like Seattle, and they improved their quarterback situation. They went to the Super Bowl. So teams would call the Texans about CJ Stroud. And then teams would also call the Cincinnati Bengals about Joe Burrow. And then he characterized it as trying to find a quarterback stopgap ahead of 2027. And he said that teams might call about that, and that Stroud could be that quarterback stopgap guy ahead of the 2027 draft when there's a lot more draft picks. And so it was very much all over the place from Todd McShay. And ultimately it ventured into nothing burger territory, because he said, "I'm not saying these guys are getting traded, but people will call, people will think about them moving teams." I got to thinking, how does that make any sense? So first, a team would try to have CJ Stroud improve their quarterback position. I don't know if that's the type of quarterback you want to be trading for right now in the improve your quarterback position conversation because of where CJ Stroud finished his season. But if he was a clear improvement over the other quarterback situation, why would the Texans do the deal? The Texans are closer to winning Super Bowls than they are tearing this thing down and starting over at square one at quarterback. Like, that's a very weird spot to be. And then he kind of put CJ Stroud as, well, maybe he could be the guy for a year for somebody else before 2027. You can just find out, and if it doesn't work, then you draft a guy. Isn't that the situation the Texans are currently in right now? So it very much centered around a Todd McShay nothing burger is the category that I put it into, especially when you're comparing CJ Stroud and Joe Burrow. Those situations are very different, and the Texans don't have any sort of way to get drastically better at quarterback. If there was an upgrade at quarterback, I'd be in favor of a conversation about trading CJ Stroud. If there was a person that was a bit of an unknown that I felt, well, maybe this coaching staff takes this guy, turns him into a player better than CJ Stroud, maybe I'd be intrigued in that conversation. There's not that player. And if the Texans are entering into any sort of trade conversation when it comes to CJ Stroud, they should be looking to do the Los Angeles Rams, Detroit Lions deal from a few years ago, where you take CJ Stroud, who's the younger player, and you will get a more proven, much better commodity. that player's not available. That quarterback is not there. Cincinnati's not doing it with Joe Burrow. Baltimore's not doing it with Lamar Jackson. Buffalo's not doing it with Josh Allen. There's not another guy that you can point to and say, oh, well, trade CJ Stroud and go and improve the quarterback spot because you get the veteran, the more experienced guy, the guy that's ready to be better than CJ Stroud. That guy's not out there. There's not a path to improving the quarterback spot that I can currently see that would make you want to move off of CJ Stroud. So McShay and his conversation, which originally called CJ Stroud CJ Carr, had draft on the brain. That's the Notre Dame quarterback next year. He put him in one category, then he put him in another category, and then he kind of just put a couple of small pieces of evidence about like, oh, well, let's blame the Texans for not getting the most out of Stroud, and just said, oh, maybe a team would call. Nothing burger. Yeah. No thank you. No satiety out of that conversation because it wasn't even really a report. It was just teams are going to look for quarterback improvements or stopgap quarterbacks. But putting Stroud in both those categories was quite strange by Todd McShay. So the McShay nothing burger is the start here. It got McLean all hot and bothered. It got a couple of people on the internet all hot and bothered, and it did not get me all hot and bothered. It was in the nothing burger category for me. Let's see if I can find the full comments for Todd McShay and what he had to say for SNL tomorrow. And we can go over the nothing burger from Todd McShay. Again, if there was a route, a path, a way to drastically improve the quarterback spot or take a calculated risk to improve the quarterback spot, count me among the people that would be interested and intrigued in seeing that potentially happen. But that is not the case right now for the Houston Texans and for CJ Stroud. So the nothing burger from Todd McShay is where we start today. But speaking of CJ Stroud, Stroud's already got the offseason work underway, already got the new do, already got the haircut, and then he's already working on his game. But I think it's a very intriguing and interesting element of his game that he's working on. Let me show you a post on Instagram. This is from a young man who is a quarterback in California's Instagram. His name is Julius Stokel. And Julius Stokel got to meet CJ Stroud and take a picture with him and tagged CJ Stroud in the photo and then tagged a quarterback training company. So as you see there, the 3DQB tag in Southern California is right there. Now, who are 3DQB, you ask? Well, 3DQB, again, is a quarterback training company. And as you see here, they're the quarterback training company for the reigning MVP of the National Football League, Matthew Stafford. And digging more into this 3DQB training group that CJ Stroud worked out with and learning a little bit more about them, it was a pretty intriguing place to start the offseason for CJ Stroud. One, we know about Stroud's deep affinity for Matthew Stafford. He's talked at length about how much he likes Stafford, how much he watches Stafford in the offseason. The offenses that Stafford has previously run are offenses that CJ Stroud has mentioned, offenses that he likes to watch when he is watching football. This is the group that works with Matt Stafford in the offseason. And you're putting that together, you're like, hey, that's a pretty good training group to work with. Looking at 3DQB in Southern California and understanding a little bit more about their program, their two founders are baseball coaches. And it's a former USC pitching coach and then a former Major League Baseball player by the name of Tom House. And their main focus at 3DQB, which is where CJ Stroud seemingly worked out, is repairing, refining, and mastering the mechanics of the quarterback spot. And if you think about CJ Stroud these past couple of seasons, the mechanics have been a little iffy. So going to this 3DQB place, working out with mechanic re-engineers at the quarterback spot, it's a nice spot to start an offseason that is a very important offseason for not only CJ Stroud, but the Houston Texans. You hang out at 3DQB, you get the mechanics right, you fix that, you fine-tune it, you adjust it, something that's been pretty off the past couple of years. You think about accuracy. Some of that can be mechanics. You think about some of the lighter tosses that Stroud has made that look like they don't have as much power or juice. You think about some of the interceptions that he's made, getting around late to guys, not throwing where his feet are pointed, throwing off that back foot so the ball kind of warbles in the air. Stroud's done a lot of that over the past 2 seasons where he hasn't been a really good quarterback on a consistent basis for the Houston Texans. So you start with Matt Stafford's coaches, you get the mechanics fine-tuned, adjusted, changed up, fixed up, and all of a sudden, maybe you have a nice, solid base to work off of here for the rest of this offseason on the things you need to improve, getting deeper into what the Houston Texans are going to do on offense. When you do meet up with those wide receivers, the pass catchers to work out, as C.J. Stroud often does in the offseason, you're fine-tuned to the exact level that you need to be fine-tuned to so you're not making easy mechanical mistakes on game days that lead to throwing off your back foot, throwing interceptions, not getting the ball to guys in a timely, quick manner because you have this or that wrong with the engineering of your throw. Starting there, fixing the mechanics, which have been a little iffy, in large part of that falls under the purview of the quarterback coach. None of us are super thrilled that Gerard Johnson remains the quarterback coach for this Houston Texans team, but the starting spot of the offseason work for C.J. Stroud, pretty intriguing starting spot. You work with the MVPs, coaches here in the offseason. It's a pretty good place to begin a offseason of importance for not only the Houston Texans, but certainly C.J. Stroud. A couple of more things that I want to get to on the show. We'll talk about some of the cuts around the league and a couple of names that are very intriguing. Very is the wrong word. That are slightly intriguing in very specific roles for this Houston Texans team. And then we'll take a look at the roster as a whole and see where there needs to be volume of investment for the Houston Texans. But I want to get to some of your comments, your questions, your joys, and your concerns, and Super Chats will go to the front of the line. And Wags starts us off. Since you're saying all this, you think the Texans are giving Carr a look since he talked about coming back to a contender. Carr that Sir Wags is talking about is Derek Carr. Derek Carr mentioned last week that for the right situation, he would consider unretiring and find himself with an opportunity to play on a different team than the New Orleans Saints, where he finished up his career. He was set to play in 2025 for the Saints, didn't really recover well from a shoulder injury, ultimately decided to retire. The Saints moved on. They drafted Tyler Shuck, got a pretty decent year out of him. If Carr came back, Carr would require trading for him. He also has a fairly substantial contract, if I remember correctly. Not super expensive, but certainly not cheap. And he played 10 games in 2024, again, with a shoulder injury, had 15 touchdown passes, 5 interceptions on a pretty lowly Saints team. I would be far more interested in finding out about C.J. Stroud and where he is in his career in his 4th year in the NFL than finding out about Derek Carr coming back from a major shoulder injury after a year off in his 12th year in the National Football League. And, oh, by the way, you got to trade for him as well. So I'm out on the Derek Carr idea. I certainly understand people who are disappointed or upset with C.J. Stroud, maybe wanting to explore that, but I'm out on Derek Carr as a possibility. Carbonated Cancer weighs in with a super chat. Would you be opposed to not signing CJ to a 5th-year option and make it a prove-it year? Reasoning is that he either balls out, gets a contract, or we move on in the great quarterback class next year. So, Carbonated Cancer, I understand what you're saying, turning the 4th year into essentially what's the final year of his contract. Don't pick up the 5th-year option, and it becomes make or break for C.J. Stroud. And at the end of the year, he either becomes a highly compensated quarterback and gets a huge contract that he's absolutely worth it, or he walks away from the Houston Texans. The problem with that, though, is he can just walk to free agency if you don't pick up the 5th-year option. He just finds himself and goes to free agency, and then the Texans don't really get any sort of compensation from that. They potentially could get a comp pick from Stroud doing that, but they don't get any sort of compensation. If you pick up the fifth-year option, year 4 still becomes a make-or-break year for C.J. Stroud. And then if he makes it, then you extend his contract, you adjust how much that cap hit is in that 5th year by the contract extension, or you move on from C.J. Stroud to a team that wants him, that wants to try to have him as a reclamation project, change some things about him, and give him a go as their quarterback in 2027. You still have him under contract for that 5th year, and you can trade him to a team that is interested in him and move on from him. It's a smart business move, both short-term and long-term, regardless of Stroud's success, to pick up the 5th-year option. So I don't believe they will not pick up the 5th-year option with C.J. Stroud. That deadline is certainly not close, but not that far away when it comes to this offseason. But appreciate the super chat, Carbonated Cancer. Couple of comments, questions, joys, and concerns. We'll talk about some of the Dolphins players that were cut today and some very highly specialized roles that I think 2 of those players could indeed fill. So good to see everybody in the chat. As we mentioned earlier, JB Allen United, what's up with Tom McShay saying Stroud is a trade candidate? We talked about that up at the beginning. Fitzpatrick also floated it as an idea, former Texans quarterback Ryan Fitzpatrick on his show with Andrew Whitworth. So that got floated as an idea. Rick says CJ needs to refocus on his extraordinary skill set. Well, he needs to go back and find it. The accuracy was a huge weapon in 2023. It fell off a lot in 2024 and 2025. So I will be very interested to see if he can bring some of that accuracy back. Good to see you, Tate. Doyle says Twitter is a cesspool. You're probably not wrong about that sometimes. He wants to see Graham Mertz get the quarterback opportunity. No, thank you. No, thank you. Rob says people are putting the pieces together because it's a copycat league. Seattle did it. Many other great teams have to get the right guy to win. Now it's a win-win for everyone, including CJ. It's a lose for the Texans because they're not getting the better guy in the equation. You move off of CJ because you believe there's an upgrade, not to downgrade just to get a couple of extra draft picks in this upcoming, which is a fairly weak draft class. So that is something. And as King Birdie says, idiotic stuff by McShay. Yeah, it did make a lot of sense. And Paul's got some belief that Stroud's not going anywhere anytime soon. I don't believe so either. He's the quarterback in 2026 unless something crazy happens. And I can't find the crazy right now where it would happen. CJ Stroud going to be there. Chosen says, CJ will be fine. I'm buying Landry Harris penny stock in him. Okay. Okay, I like that. Landry Locker is in Las Vegas. He says, greeting from Las Vegas, ladies and gentlemen. That's not what he said, but that's kind of what he said. Yeah. Good to see HDAV Traveler in here. And there will be plenty more to talk about in the comment section as we go through some more of the news of the day and take a look at the Texans roster because the numbers game becomes very interesting and what they need to pursue, not only in free agency, but in the draft. We'll talk about that here in just a moment. But a couple of cuts here from the Miami Dolphins today, and 2 of them jump off the page in highly specialized roles that the Texans currently do not possess a player to fill that role. Okay? So 2 highly specialized roles that could or should be filled by Dolphins players, and neither one of those roles is filled by Tyreek Hill. Tyreek Hill is a free agent coming off a serious knee injury. Tyreek Hill was a huge contract. The Dolphins are saving a bunch of money getting rid of him. I have no interest in Tyreek Hill. The Texans should have no interest in Tyreek Hill. Most people believe it's a foregone conclusion. He'll reunite with Andy Reid and company in Kansas City. You'll have Mahomes and Tyreek Hill again at some point when Hill is indeed healthy. But I have no interest in Tyreek Hill. He was the first of 3 cuts by the Miami Dolphins today. The second cut was also a wide receiver, and that is wide receiver Nick Westbrook-Ikhine. Now, if you think this name sounds familiar, it does. Nick Westbrook-Ikhine is a player that had spent a good amount of time in the AFC South. 5 seasons with the Tennessee Titans with varying levels of success before he went to Miami on a pretty small 2-year deal, and the Dolphins moved on after 1 year in the deal and after the worst season of Nick Westbrook-Akine's career since his rookie year when he barely got any opportunities. But in 2024, Nick Westbrook-Akine had about 500 yards, had about 15 yards per reception, and had 9 touchdowns. That's right, 9 touchdowns, including a 98-yard touchdown in 2024. I still believe that this is a football player that is a useful player in a very particular and certain skill position, and that is your speedy outside guy. The Texans don't currently have a player like Nick Westbrook-Akine. They do not have a pure speed guy that only plays on the outside. That's where Nick Westbrook-Akine primarily plays. They don't have that guy on the roster. Jaden Higgins is not that guy. Nico Collins is not that guy. That's not how the Texans use Jalen Noel. Xavier Hutchinson's not that guy. Justin Watson's not that guy. Nick Westbrook-Akine would be cheap, and it would be intriguing to have him as a camp body, get him in the building, see if the speed is still there, and see if there's something that you can draw out in, a very specialized particular role. Should he play over Jaden Higgins? No. Should he play over Jalen Noel? No. Should he play over Xavier Hutchinson? Yeah, probably not. Okay, he just had the worst year of his career in 2025 after having the best year of his career in 2024. But I would say you don't end up with 9 touchdowns on accident in the National Football League. And he got better, it felt like, towards the end of his stay with the Titans. Of course, it's hard to judge players a lot on Tennessee because they were such a dumpster fire for some of those years. And offensively, they had some issues. They were primarily run things through Derrick Henry. But I'm intrigued in Nick Westbrook-Akine. It's probably one of the only people in the world that I am that is still intrigued by Nick Westbrook-Akine. But as a backup speed-only option for this team, I certainly would be intrigued to see if there's anything left, kick the tires on a veteran that just 2 years ago scored 9 touchdowns for a pretty bad Tennessee Titans football team, might I add. Okay? A pretty bad Tennessee Titans football team. Bearcat, this is very funny and very true. Nick Westbrook-Akine is I'm in a bind at 11:50 on Sunday fantasy waiver wire player. Absolutely. Absolutely. He's been that guy probably many, many times. Many, many times. So that is very, very true. Now, we talked about Tyreek Hill, no interest there. We talked about Nick Westbrook-Akine, no interest there. Guard James Daniels. Now, if you remember from an offseason ago, James Daniels was a fairly intriguing name in free agency. He was a veteran guard that played a bunch of football, most recently for the Pittsburgh Steelers, but he'd had an Achilles injury in 2024 that had robbed him of his season, and he had a pretty good start for a few games to 2024. 2025, he played 3 snaps for the Miami Dolphins. He played 3 snaps, tore his pectoral muscle, didn't play again. The Dolphins released him today. Daniels could be this year's version of Trent Brown in that he's a veteran that has played a lot of football, has a lot of experience, and if healthy, could work his way into a starting job. And I think about what James Daniels brings to the table and where you would insert him or where you could put him in to the lineup. And would you rather Jared Patterson play or James Daniels, who's been a consistent, reliable guard a couple of different times in his career? Would you rather Drew Scruggs play, or would you rather James Daniels, who, again, has been a consistent, reliable guard a couple of times in his career? Coming off of 2 season-ending injuries, very different, pectoral, Achilles. Coming off 2 season-ending injuries, he should be cheap. And he probably is not looking to get a starting job because the market would dictate that a guy like him doesn't need a starting job. But James Daniels, if you added him to the depth of the offensive line room, I'd much rather have him be a depth piece than Drew Scruggs. I'd much rather him be a depth piece than City So on the practice squad or Eli Cox on the practice squad. So it's not the biggest, craziest, most fun move, but it's certainly a plan for something to not work out in free agency or plan for something to not work out in the draft. And hey, if you had to play James Daniels, you can do a lot worse than James Daniels. Just ask the Texans when they played Laken Tomlinson for a year almost. So that's where I am on a couple of those cuts. Again, highly specialized back of the roster guys, and hell, maybe even guys that you just have in camp that you hope get beat out by somebody else. But it just kind of got my wheels turning on some of the highly specific roster pieces that this team might need. Speaking of the roster pieces, the numbers on the roster, they paint a pretty clear picture of where the Texans need to go in free agency and the draft, and we'll talk about that here in just a minute. Jeff Martin says, need a running back. Certainly. And if some good running backs get cut the next couple of days or some guys that would be useful, then yeah, maybe. D-Skills, I saw Landry in line for the Texans media scrum after a game, and dude is about 10 feet tall. I believe he is officially 6'6" with the closeness to 6'7". Rick says, O-line and tight end is all we need, and of course, CJ not to poop the bed. That's it. Rick says, hey, that's it. O-line, tight end, that's it. You need some running backs. You need, some depth over there on defense. So, Cody ain't that tall. Cody is 6'1". Okay, so that's that. Touch of Trent talking about James Daniels. He can also play center. Did so in college. It's worth noting he also played center in the NFL as well. So James Daniels has a little bit of a interior offensive line versatility history, just like Trent Brown had a left tackle, right tackle versatility history. And so Wag says, heck, give him a 1-year prove-it deal. Casserole is known for it. I do love when they call Nick Caserio Nick Casserole, because there's a hunch that he's probably never had a casserole. And if he has, he probably ate it begrudgingly. Doyle's asked about David Njoku a couple of times. I'm in favor of Njoku. It would create quite the pass-catching duo with Njoku and Dalton Schultz. I don't believe he's going to be super expensive. You would have to go out there and find some blocking first tight ends to round out the room, make it a little bit better. But I'm certainly in favor of David Njoku being a guy the Texans pursue. I wouldn't put it really high on my list, but I'd certainly be interested in Njoku getting an opportunity in Houston. And he could sort of take over for Dalton Schultz. Schultz's contract expires after this upcoming season. You have Njoku to be that pass-catching first veteran, and then you can continue to round out the tight end room. So it's not a bad idea there, Doyle. Kyle weighs in with a super chat. What do you think about the BS Reddit report of Texans' interest in Mike Evans? Also, can they afford a tier 2 guard and a running back? Something like Elijah Vera Tucker and Breece Hall, both from the Jets. I'll go with the second first, then we'll talk about the first. The second, the latter part of it would be, yes, they can afford damn near whatever they want. You can adjust and manipulate and kick things down the road and change things. So the Texans have enough cap space to sign pretty much whoever they want. I do believe Elijah Vera Tucker from the Jets is going to be pretty expensive. His versatility, being able to play at least 4 different spots on the offensive line, maybe even being able to play center, that's something to think about. And he's just right there in his mid-20s. Now, again, his injury history is far lengthier than some of the other free agent guards that you're going to see, but he'd be intriguing. And then Breece Hall is number 2 for me in free agent running backs, behind only Kenneth Walker of the Seattle Seahawks. And that's if Kenneth Walker hits free agency. I guess we could also say that's if Breece Hall hits free agency as well. But the Jets' weirdness with him last offseason makes me think they may try to do something to keep Breece Hall. But assuming both those players hit free agency, Walker and Hall is number 2 for me. Walker's number 1 for me. Obviously, if you signed Vera Tucker, who's a little bit more expensive, maybe you don't go with Kenneth Walker. That's a hefty free agency investment, but you go with a guy like Breece Hall, who should be a little bit cheaper than Kenneth Walker. I like both of these ideas. I like this. I like the idea of both of those players, Kyle, possibly together, but all I would say, probably not likely to put them together. As far as the Mike Evans Houston Texans report, there's nothing to that right now, and it wouldn't make a lot of sense. Mike Evans is an aging veteran who, for the first time in a very long time, got hurt last season and missed a very extended period of time. He's not going to be cheap, and the Texans have two younger players than him. Nico Collins right now is better than Mike Evans, and Jaden Higgins, if he takes a big jump, could give you something that would be close to what a good year of Mike Evans would be. Mike Evans is older and expensive. Nick Caserio's comments about the wide receiver room from a few weeks ago ring true. It doesn't give you a unique skill set off of what those two guys already have on the outside. So I don't buy it. I don't believe that it is a thing that you should put much stock into. And I have to imagine there's probably a hope in Tampa to keep Mike Evans around as well. Is Mike Evans even set to be a free agent? Is he getting cut or something? Yeah, so he's set to be a free agent. He's going to have a void in his contract. But again, I do think the Buccaneers will be trying to bring him back. 22 Voss says Fitzpatrick, that's Ryan Fitzpatrick, the former Texans quarterback, now Amazon analyst, is right. We can build this already strong roster and have a super strong team for years to come. Just have to part ways with CJ. Yeah, what are you getting for, like, if you think he's so useless that you just have to move on from him and solidify your team, like, one, who's replacing him, and two, what are you getting? Like, what are you getting for CJ Stroud that gives you this ability to solidify your team for years? You know what you need to solidify? The quarterback spot. You know how you find out about it? You play CJ Stroud in 2026. A couple more questions. We'll go through some of the numbers on the roster. E-Man, thoughts on Rico Dowdle? Solid veteran. I would probably prefer a higher drafted running back to associate with Rico Dowdle. So you had Dowdle, Marks, and maybe a top 2 round running back in the running back room. That'd be kind of more of a running back room I'd be comfortable with, but I'm certainly not out on Rico Dowdle. And Mike Banks asks, what about Ravens center Tyler Linderbaum? Very expensive, and certainly would solidify one of the tentpole positions on the offensive line the Texans think highly of. It feels to me like Jake Andrews has a inside track to the center spot. And if Linderbaum was the right price, yes, you could give Andrews the opportunity to compete for a guard spot. Linderbaum would be a very expensive but a very fun player to add to the offensive line room. He's one of the best centers in football. I appreciate everybody for tuning into SNL today. Landry Locker in Las Vegas. We'll have the Texans Collective tonight at 6 o'clock. Don't want to miss out on that. Always have some fun talking with Sean Pendergast and Reggie as well. So SNL today, Texans Collective tonight. The Locker Room will have stuff for you. My channel, Houston Football, will have stuff for you. And we'll be on SNL tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Let's take a look at this roster spot here. Or the roster construction, I should say, the numbers of the roster. And this isn't really as much about the players that are on the roster as much as just kind of take a little snapshot of where the Texans are ahead of the combine, where they'll do a lot of kind of those early conversations about free agency and start thinking about that draft and building their board and putting things together from that way. And then right after the combine, free agency is a week away. So the combine finishes up on a Saturday, and then about 9 days later, free agency gets going. So it's pretty quick. It turns around pretty quick. But just looking at the numbers here, we'll go position by position. There's a couple of spots that could use an infusion of bodies, either via free agency or the upcoming NFL draft in April. The quarterback spot, if they ran the quarterbacks back, just these three guys, that'd be more than fine. Davis Mills as the key backup to CJ Stroud is the important piece. If you wanted to swap out Graham Mertz, you certainly could. The players in red are players that did not play pretty much at all in 2025 and are set to be on the roster here in 2026 for now, by the way. So if you ran the running back or the quarterback room back just like that, then you could see where it'd just be fine. It'd be fine. You know, you're not going to find an upgrade over CJ Stroud. They already invested in Mills as the backup. If you wanted to swap Mertz out for a different body, or you wanted to swap Mertz out for Case Keenum, be my guest. I'd be totally fine with that. You could probably cut Graham Mertz, put him on the practice squad if you desperately wanted to keep him. The Texans need a starting running back. You look at the running back room, they need a starting running back, they need a backup running back, and they probably need a special team specialist out of the running back room. Now, you could argue British Brooks is that new special team specialist. Maybe British Brooks is the new Dare Agumbawale. I would not count on Jawar Jordan carving out a role that you can count on in the running back room. I would add multiple bodies to the running back situation. I'd add somebody that for sure is the starter ahead of Woody Marks. Marks can back that player up. I'd add another body that could challenge Marks for backup opportunities and maybe has a little bit of a different skill set than Woody Marks. And then I'd have maybe British Brooks be that. I would have British Brooks perhaps be that specialist out of the running back room. I don't believe Joe Mixon's going to be on the team very long. I do believe they'll cut Joe Mixon after the NFL scouting combine. Though the wide receiver room, you look at it, you look at the starters right here, Nico Collins and Jaden Higgins. That's pretty well taken care of. You know those two guys are going to get the opportunity. Jalen Noel as your primary slot guy. Xavier Hutchinson as a key backup on the outside. Same with Justin Watson. Watson's got a lot of special teams usefulness, so does Hutchinson. I'd love probably another veteran that maybe would be a backup to Jalen Noel at the slot position. Now, obviously, you have Tank Dell, but counting on anything from Tank Dell in 2026 would be a precarious spot to be in as an organization. Josh Kelly, Jared Wayne, you can't count on them helping out. So a veteran presence in the slot, so primarily a slot receiver to back up Jalen Noel is something that I'd look for. But from a body standpoint, there's really not a lot of bodies you want to add to this wide receiver situation. The tight end room, Dalton Schultz, Cade Stover. Brevin Jordan didn't play last year. Luke Lachey was on the practice squad all year, and Lane Pryor was hurt last year and didn't play last year. Multiple bodies necessary here in the tight end room. You need somebody that could push Brevin Jordan potentially off the roster. You need somebody that can potentially push Cade Stover off the roster. You need a veteran. You need a young guy. You need guys that can block. You need bodies here in the tight end position. So free agency and the draft places to go and find those things. I'm going to skip offensive tackle for right now and go over the interior offensive line. You know, Tytus Howard's going to be a factor. I believe he's going to be on the interior offensive line. Jake Andrews is right now your starting center. You need somebody to push him. That's probably a veteran pushing Jake Andrews. Patterson and Scruggs, I can't imagine you want both of those guys to be depth pieces, so maybe one of them gets moved on from. I think more likely Juice Scruggs than Jared Patterson. Sidney So and Eli Cox bring basically nothing to the table right now. You need veterans. You need potential starters at guard that you need to add here. You need potential starters from a rookie standpoint that you need to add here. You could add a lot to the interior offensive line from a numbers standpoint. So a lot of work to do here, but not nearly as much work as offensive tackle. You look at this offensive tackle situation, and only Ariante Ursery could start right away for you. You don't want to start Blake Fisher. If you could start Blake Fisher, you'd have started Blake Fisher last year. The Texans have just one. The Texans have just one starter at tackle if you consider Tytus Howard an interior offensive lineman, and that's Ariante Ursery. You need bodies. You need veteran backups here in offensive tackle. You need a rookie with some upside for the right tackle spot. Blake Fisher's not that guy anymore. I don't know if he has any upside left. But from a number standpoint, you need some guys here. So, again, that's free agent bodies and probably draft pick bodies as well. You look over at defensive end. Think about how many defensive ends they usually have on the roster. You need bodies here. You need somebody to challenge Dylan Horton for his spot. He's a very okay player on a good day. The consistency's not really there. Derek Barnett's a free agent. Danico Autry's a free agent. You could bring Barnett back, but you still need guys to challenge 4 reps behind Will Anderson and Danielle Hunter at defensive end. So veterans, and with Hunter's contract expiring at the conclusion of 2026 currently, you could use a long-term solution for that in spot opposite Anderson if you spend a higher draft pick on somebody at defensive end. Now, you've got some bodies here at defensive tackle, but 2 of them didn't even play football last year, and the last one was hurt all of last year. So you have Tommy Togiai and Mario Edwards Jr. under contract. Keontae Hamilton was a draft pick late in the draft. He got hurt in training camp, missed the entire year. Junior Tafuna was on the undrafted, or was an undrafted free agent, then was on the practice squad for the entirety of the year. You can't count on either one of those guys. Maybe one of them surprises you, but they're looking for that 5th defensive tackle spot, not that 3rd defensive tackle spot. You need some starters at defensive tackle. You need some long-term options because Togiai and Mario Edwards, their contracts are both up at the end of this upcoming season as we talk about it right now. You need numbers and bodies here at defensive tackle, veterans and young guys. Linebacker, you can probably get by with some stopgap backups like EJ Speed, but I'd like to see the investment in a young player that D'Amico Ryans could mold to maybe take over either Azeez Al-Shire or Henry To'oTo'o's spot. Again, as we talk, 2 players, Al-Shire and To'oTo'o, that are set to hit free agency. You need bodies. You need guys under contract beyond 2026 at linebacker. Jake Hansen, again, I believe it's a 1-year deal for Jake Hansen that he's still got left. Jamal Hill, yes, but you don't even play Jamal Hill at linebacker. He's a special teams ace. So veterans, young guys, bodies at linebacker. Cornerback, you're pretty solid at cornerback. You might want to throw some more bodies at it, maybe from a veteran standpoint, but we know Derek Stingley is going to start. We know Kamari Lassiter is going to start. And we know they believed Jalen Smith was going to be good enough to be the 3rd corner or the top backup outside cornerback. So looking at Smith, you think about him as the top backup outside. Tremont Smith's a special teams forward guy with a little bit of depth. If you could push Tremont Smith down the roster, down the depth chart with a veteran who's a key backup, maybe it's got a little bit of inside cornerback, slot cornerback usefulness, you certainly would look at that. Gianna Carter, Elijah Huzzy, Brandon Condrington, all fighting for backup cornerback special teams spots. Petrie's in the safeties, but he's really the nickel for this team. I'd love to see a true blue backup who can also play some outside to Jalen Petrie from a numbers standpoint. We know Bullock's going to start. Ultimately, what they do next to him will be intriguing. Jalen Reed was a guy that they were going to give the opportunity to. He got hurt, and he was hurt a bunch at the safety spot. Jimmy Ward and Kayvon Merriweather basically didn't play last year. Ward, I don't believe he's going to be on the team much longer. You can move on from him. Merriweather's fighting for a chance to stick around past cut downs. Reed, I wouldn't automatically hand him the job. You found the right veteran to put next to Bullock. You certainly could do that. If you found a highly touted rookie safety to add to the depth situation here at safety, you could do that. And finally, looking at special teams, you do not have a punter set to be under contract. Tommy Townsend is going to be a free agent. So you looking at the numbers here, good at quarterback, probably not a high priority to add bodies at wide receiver, but need bodies, free agents, and draft picks at running back. Need bodies, free agents, and draft picks at tight end. Need bodies on the offensive line, free agents, and draft picks. Lesser of a priority from a draft pick standpoint, but need free agent bodies at defensive end and defensive tackle, though I would move defensive tackle a little bit higher up in the draft needs conversation. You need depth at linebacker, and you need a starter at safety. So as you start to kind of put that together, the Texans have about 60 players on their roster, give or take. You cut a few of these guys that we talked about, you're looking at about 55. You got plenty of room to add bodies. It's just you got a long shopping list here. As you start to think about free agency, which will occur in a matter of weeks, and the NFL draft, which is a couple of months away. Let's look at the numbers game here for the Houston Texans roster. Let's get to some of your comments and your questions, your joys and your concerns. Riverbend, we appreciate you for the super chat. Why not pick 2 top 100 running backs? Jadarian Price from Notre Dame and Jonah Coleman from Washington, both probably under $5 million together for the next 2 years. Linderbaum say $18 million for a context. I'm not opposed to it. I'm not opposed to having a veteran Woody Marks and a couple of rookies behind Woody Marks. That's not a bad running back room at all. I do believe you need a veteran who's proven some things at the NFL level to really round out that room, especially when Woody Marks had some of the challenges he had last year running the football. Some of it offensive line induced, some of it Woody Marks induced. But that's something I feel strongly about. A veteran who's been there, done that, and succeeded running the football needs to be in that running back room with Woody Marks and one or two rookies. I'm in favor of two of those rookies. Certainly. So, Riverbend, it's a good idea. A couple more of your comments, questions, joys, and concerns, and we'll wrap up, and the collective will head your way at 6 o'clock tonight. Yeah, definitely rookie halfback or running back contract, but a vet interior offensive line contract. I would like long-term solutions on the trenches, both defensive tackle and interior offensive line by the Texans, if they can manage it. 22 Va. CJ gets his $60 million. We won't see significant improvements on the O-line at tight end and or other critical areas. Yes, but they're not just giving him $60 million if he doesn't look like a $60 million quarterback. If he looks like a $60 million quarterback, you'd be happy to hand him the money and you'll just figure everything else out. If CJ Stroud played this past year like a $60 million quarterback, the Texans would have won the Super Bowl. He did not play like a $60 million quarterback. Christian Kirk is a veteran slot receiver. I was thinking maybe somebody more along the lines of not going to be in the way and impede the progress of Jalen Noel and a clear backup to Jalen Noel. Thrillbin spoke. If CJ won't expect anything under $50 million, I'd sign him if he would accept anything under $50 million, I would sign him to a 3-4 year deal. Why? You don't have to sign him. He has to prove that he's worth it. He's not worth $45 million right now. With the cap going up, it gives us much money to spend elsewhere. Go make him prove it in 2026 before you talk about new contracts. Speaking of new contracts, Joe Thomas wants Trent Brown back. I'm not totally against Trent Brown coming back and being the initial starter at right tackle, but I would like a backup plan, a very clear non-Blake Fisher backup plan for Trent Brown if Trent Brown starts the year as the right tackle. A lot of cornerbacks under contract, but biggest weakness as soon as Lassiter or Stingley goes out. Jalen Smith's got to be better. They believe highly in him. He looked good in training camp. That's certainly going to be something to pay attention to. And having a veteran that can push Smith maybe down the depth chart or be another option certainly is not a bad approach there. Texan Swerve wants to get rid of Trevon Smith. I certainly would understand that. He brings you very little there when he has to go play defense. Solid on special teams. I'm not sold on Dylan Horton. Who is? King Birdie, I want Elijah Vera Tucker, the Jets' interior offensive lineman. Maybe if he leaves that trash MetLife field, he'll have a healthy season. Well, he's had some upper body injuries too. So it's not just the lower body. Don't sign Kenneth Walker. He is super injury prone, and the defense is what won the Super Bowl, not the offense. The award just has to go to an offensive player. So the advocating against signing Kenneth Walker for the Houston Texans in free agency, coming off of a year where he played 17 games and coming off a career where he has only missed, as I look at this right now, 4 games in the first 2 years and 6 games, so 10 games. Let's call it 11. He's only missed 11 games in 4 seasons. I wouldn't exactly call that injury prone. Kenneth Walker would be fantastic for the Houston Texans. He runs hard. He's patient. He's smart. He sees holes. He's physical. He's a really good player that would complement well with what Woody Marks does well. I like Kenneth Walker a lot. Rice Kaiser says, Tom House is legit. If you're wondering who Tom House is, that's the owner-operator of the place that C.J. Stroud seemingly worked out to start his offseason workouts, and they are mechanically forward in engineering their quarterbacks. A lot of teams have a lot of quarterbacks, have worked with Tom House and his company out there in Southern California. That stat about teams that win the Super Bowl almost never having vet running back contract stands out to me. Okay. Well, the Eagles won it with the most expensive running back in football. I think you can manage. That's just one example, but I mean, the running back was one of the biggest investments the Eagles made. What do you think of Fisher dropping some weight and becoming more of a blocking tight end? I think it's a horrible idea. I don't mean to be dismissive, but I mean, why does he need to lose weight to be the blocking tight end? He's already one of the blocking tight ends. Any info on Tank Dell? He's going to give it a go. Saw a workout video of Dell over the weekend. Looked like he's working out hard. He's ready to get back out there. He's going to give it a go. But you can't bet on Tank Dell. I'd move Brown to guard and get Hecht. That is Sam Hecht, the Kansas State center. And Trent Brown is too large to play guard. Wasn't good at guard at Florida. It was a silly idea when Muschamp and company moved him to guard. He doesn't want to play guard. I would not move him to guard. King Birdie, I'd rather have Breece Hall than Walker. I totally understand rather having Breece Hall. He's going to be a little bit cheaper. He's been in a dumpster fire that is the Jets for the past few seasons, and maybe there's a little bit more juice to Breece than Kenneth Walker. I certainly understand that. John wants Caden Proctor, the tackle from Alabama. He wants Katron Allen, the running back from Penn State. He wants Sam Roush, the tight end from Stanford. I would hate drafting Caden Proctor. Proctor was very disappointing in Alabama this past season. He's got a weight concern. He was 400 pounds a couple of years ago. He's already a massive human at 366 pounds. And you don't need a weight concern every year. There's better tackles than Caden Proctor. So that's what I would say about that. So the McShay Nothing Burger led us into a conversation about CJ's offseason transformation getting underway with the mechanics gurus that helped Matthew Stafford in the offseason. Some interesting, highly specific veteran free agents that are available thanks to the Dolphins, moving on from them. And the numbers game starting to become pretty clear for the Houston Texans from a roster standpoint. Need some bodies in free agency and the draft at running back, tight end, the offensive line, defensive line, interior maybe for the draft, exterior maybe for the free agency, and maybe a safety if you're pondering and thinking about it a little bit as well. So that's where we are on SNL. Be back tomorrow at 4 o'clock. We'll have the Texans Collective for you tonight. I've got some fun stuff coming on the Houston Football Channel. Of course, Landry has you covered over on the Locker Room with Landry Locker. He would tell you that always remember, it doesn't matter if you believe and eat the nothing burgers or if you think they are just nothing burgers. We're all in this together, and I would always tell you to eat good, sleep good, be good. We'll talk Texans again soon. Thanks for watching, everybody. Talk to you tonight on Texans Collective.